Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak in support of H.R. 3962, the Securing and Enabling Commerce Using Remote and Electronic Notarization Act of 2021. In the modern era, you can cash a check, book a flight, and lock and unlock your doors all from the convenience of your smartphone. But to get something notarized, a process of authenticating documents required for wills, marriage certificates, mortgages, and other valuable assets, many states still require a person to physically appear before a notary public. Now, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, in-person notarizations were not only inconvenient, but they also posed a health risk. In-person notarizations forced far too many consumers to choose between potentially exposing themselves to COVID-19 and purchasing a house or updating their wills. So to protect consumers and commerce, dozens of states enacted laws or took emergency actions to permit electronic and remote online notarizations. Such notarizations allow the consumer and the notary to execute notarizations through secure audiovisual communications. As our lives are returning to a new normal, it has become apparent that electronic and remote online notarizations are a valuable tool for facilitating commerce and making notarial services more accessible. And such tools are particularly important for vulnerable populations like the elderly, underserved communities, and those lacking access to reliable transportation. But state action alone cannot assure universal access to electronic and remote online notarizations that need robust security standards and consumer protections. This nation lacks a universal standard for electronic and remote online notarizations. As a result, there is no standard that permits nationwide use of electronic and remote online notarizations, creates robust security requirements, and ensures electronic and remote online notarizations are valid nationwide. That's why I want to thank Congresswoman Dean for the Secure Notarization Act. This legislation will transition notarization to the 21st century without sacrificing security, making the process more convenient and safer for the American public. Now, I just want to commend Representative Dean for her leadership in this bipartisan legislation. She has been pressing for this to get out of committee and on the floor, and we're finally here today. So I strongly urge my colleagues to support it today, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in favor of H.R. 3962, the Securing and Enabling Commerce Using Remote and Electronic Notarization Act of 2021. Historically, notarization has required a person to appear before a notary public. However, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, such in-person appointments were paused, causing states to permit remote online notarizations so as to ensure commerce would not come to a halt when so many other things were. The passage of H.R. 3962, which establishes nationwide standards and technical requirements for remote online notarization, showcases the benefits that technology can have to reduce the barriers on commerce in America and provide an easier way of life for our constituents. I want to thank the Representative Dean and Armstrong for their work on this legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 3962, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll yield such time as she may consume to the sponsor of this bill, Congresswoman Dean.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you, Chairman Pallone, for the work of you and your committee. I thank you, Representative Carter, and I especially thank Representative Armstrong for working alongside me on the Secure Notarization Act, H.R. 3962. The Secure Notarization Act will authorize nationwide use of remote online notarization, also known as RON, and would include key consumer protections, including multi-factor authentication of the signer and the use of tamper-evident technology. The bill would also ensure the certainty of interstate recognition of RON. Importantly, this bill sets a floor for the use of remote online notarization, and states will be able to regulate further protections as they decide. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us so much about the necessity and the benefits of new technologies used to streamline services for consumers across industries. Remote online notarization has been and should continue to be a time-saving, convenient, and safe way for consumers to execute important documents. Notarizations are used extensively in real estate transactions and in other key areas including affidavits, powers of attorney, living wills, advance directives, and more. Remote online notarizations allow the consumer, notary, and other parties to a transaction to be in different locations using two-way audio-visual communication to securely notarize documents. This process provides assured consumer access to notarization and affords customers options and flexible scheduling. This is key. Remote online notarization allows for flexibility for people who are chronically ill or immobile, for parents who can't get away from work or taking care of their children, to service members abroad seeking to buy a home or correct wills. I know well the impact this bill could have for notary publics across the country. When I served as a state representative in Pennsylvania, most members of our team were notaries, and our office served as a notary hub for the local community. I know many people struggled making appointments, often because of a lack of transportation or because they were ill and physically unable to move. Remote online notarization would have allowed us to streamline our performance and better serve our community. This legislation will help streamline notary processes into the digital and electronic consumer-facing ecosystem, ensuring as people become more reliant on digital spaces and platforms that they have the services and access to these services as important as our notary system. This bill is supported by more than 120 of our colleagues. It passed out of E&C by 56-0. It is supported by a coalition of 20 industry partners. Simply stated, it's common sense and convenient legislation that is completely secure. Mr. Speaker, I thank Chairman Pallone and Ranking Member McMorris Rogers, as well as Representative Carter, for their support of this bill, moving it swiftly through Energy and Commerce Committee to the House floor. I'd also like to thank Congressman Perlmutter and Reschenthaler for being strong allies and supporters of this bill as we worked to forge a path. Finally, I would like to thank the co-lead of this legislation, Congressman Kelly Armstrong. I see you here. Mr. Armstrong, delighted to have worked with you, for all your work and the work of your staff in helping us make this strong piece of bipartisan legislation. You and I took this bill on the road and gathered a tremendous amount of support and had fun along the way. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to recognize the Republican sponsor of this bill, the gentleman from North Dakota, Representative Armstrong.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H.R. 3962, the Secure Notarization Act, is a bipartisan bill that would authorize the nationwide use of remote online notarizations, which is simply an electronic notarization where the party and notary are in different locations. Society has widely adopted remote meetings, events, and even social activities. Requirements for a signer to be physically present before a notary are often impractical and sometimes impossible, such as with military deployments or travel restrictions. Remote online notarization increases the use of notarization and allows individuals to conduct crucial business, particularly if both parties are unable to be physically present with a notary. This bill would provide businesses and individuals with the ability to execute documents using two-way audio-visual communication while protecting consumers with multi-factor authentication and the use of tamper-evident technology. The bill would not replace the state laws governing the authorization and regulation of notaries public, nor would this bill alter state control over the practice of law or commonly notarized legal papers, like estate documents. It would simply provide for the recognition of remote notarization performed in interstate commerce, federal courts, and would ensure the recognition of remote notarizations performed under another state's law. This is similar to the full faith and credit clause and implementation statutes that ensure the recognition of official activities or judicial proceedings in another state. Again, this has been said, but this bill has 123 co-sponsors. It proceeded through regular order. It passed the Energy and Commerce Committee with a 56-0 vote. It also has the support of 20 organizations like the American Land Title Association, which utilizes Notary Public on a daily basis. And I too would like to thank my friend Rep. Dean for working so closely with our office and having a lot of fun as we moved a notary bill forward. And if you think having fun on a notary bill is easy, Mr. Speaker, you got to work at it. But we've had a lot of fun, and I appreciate it. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman from North Dakota yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I have no additional speakers. Are prepared to close?
The gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers, and at this time I'll yield and encourage my colleagues to support this bill.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I would urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. This is bipartisan, and it's actually a very important piece of legislation. In the aftermath of COVID, we realize more and more that this type of electronic notarization really is the way to go. So I yield back.